It's Christy. Welcome to my little bedroom studio here in Maui, where today we are going to create together a bobtail squid. Now, I'm not really sure why it's called a bobtail squid. I should have looked that up. But the thing I like about it, number one, it is something that lives here in the waters in Hawaii, so that's cool. But it also is tiny and adorable and full of shimmery colors, as many of the cephalopods are. They can kind of change colors randomly, and they're just so cute. And I thought, why not take it a step further? Instead of just the shimmery shiny, let's add bling to it. So we're actually making a bling squid today, which means we're using reality as a sort of an inspiration, but not letting it limit us. So let's create together. Let's make this sparkly little bling squid that you can wear as a pendant or create in a larger scene, or who even knows what you're going to do with it. But I feel like it's our thing to do today, so let's do it. Come on. Here are the materials that we're going to use to make our bobtail squid. First, of course, is polymer clay. I'm using a nice little chunk of translucent, and usually I use Primo brand of polymer clay, but whatever you use, find something similar to what we've got here. So this is going to be the bulk of it. I'm going to use some white. Now, I've broken it down into two little bits like this because I'll actually be mixing a little of the white and a little of the granite to most of this translucent. And then I'll be saving a little of this aside and saving some of the white, which is what that second ball is for other parts of the fish. So here's our colors, translucent white, and if you have it, gray granite. That's optional. Then you need a little teeny eyeball, and this is a little glass clear eye. If you don't have a glass eye like this, you can substitute a little round stone, like a bead, a little round stone bead, something darker colored. This one's got a dark pupil, and then a lighter color around it, white, clear, around it. That's great, but if you don't have that, a dark stone is fine. I've got some flat back, hot fix glass rhinestone crystals. All right, so the glass so that they can go on the clay and get baked on the clay. The hot fix on the back glues them into the clay. So if you've got some of those, that'd be great. And these are just an AB mix, so that's got that shimmery shine color on the surface of those crystals. Then I'm using powders. I'm using a gold powder here, and this is mica powder, so it's nice and shiny, and a teal. Those are the ones I've chosen. Now, bobtail squids come in a variety of colors because, like most cephalopods, they can change their color according to their whims. So if you don't want to use those two colors and you want to use something else, then that is groovy. Paintbrush to apply powders, and then just the usual sculpting tools. I've got a needle tool, one of my Wow It's Awesome sculpting tools, a cutting blade, and then some things to pick and place the crystals, tweezers, and a little picker-up tool. This is a crystal katana, my pickup tool of choice. All right, so gather this up, and of course a little tile to work on, and then we shall get creating. The first thing I want to do is mix the color for my bobtail squid. So of the colors that I have here, I'm going to set the little bit of white aside. We'll use that later. And I'm going to cut off some of this translucent. I won't need all of that probably, but we're going to get rid of that. And so now I've got a little chunk here, and I've got these other two colors. Gray granite is also a translucent clay. So all that's going to do is introduce all these little specks, which is terrific. And then the white is just going to help make this translucent clay look not quite so yellowy, and give it a little bit of a body for the other colors to float on. And you can use all of this if you want. That will make the squid body itself a little bit more white, but I think I'm only going to use half of it. And then if I feel like it, I can add more later. But this is what I'm going to do, and mix all of this stuff thoroughly together until you have a complete blend. Here's what our blend looks like, and you can see the difference between the translucent clay and the translucent clay that we've added some white and some gray granite to. All those little flecks are terrific, and as it turns out, one of the reasons that I added it is because the bobtail squid has all these little flecks in it as part of its skin coloration, so this works great. And then, of course, we'll save this because I have plans for that later. So now I've got quite a bit. And what we want to do is we want to make the body out of this, but save some for the tentacles and the eyes. So I'm going to rip it in. It's kind of in half. We should have like sort of two equal parts. And let's just roll this into a ball. Okay, so what we're going to do is make a brooch so that this is going to be sort of 3/4 sculpted. So it's got like a flat back where the brooch is. And then it can become part of a underwater scene if you prefer, and you don't want to wear it as a brooch. I'm happy with either. One could be fun. Myself personally, I'll probably put it in some kind of a mosaic-y scene, but it would also make a delightful little brooch. So I've turned this circle into a bit of an oval. And I'm going to kind of press that down, because what I want to do is I want to have like a bas relief where you've got like the sculpture sort of coming out, but it's not completely three-dimensional all around. So something like that would work. Now what we're going to do is this whole thing is stylized, which means I'm not as concerned for reality. If I wanted to make an absolutely technically accurate sculpture, we can certainly do that, but this is art, so we get to fudge a little bit, and that's one reason why our squid is going to have crystals. Generally speaking, squids don't have crystals, although if they were given the chance, I think every one of them would bling it up. So we're going to just assume that that is something evolution did not allow the squids to have, but we can rectify that with our own crystal blingage, and we're going to do that. So here's the body. We're going to throw a few tentacles on. It'll have a little eyeball, and then we'll get jiggy with it. But before we start putting all of those little tentacly bits in the front, I want to add some of my powders onto this body and then cover it with a very thin layer of translucent so that the shimmer and the color is trapped underneath instead of just on the surface. So we're going to go back to our translucent here, and if you want, you can add some more little flecks to this to give it some more dots. I may do that, but I wouldn't add any more white because we want this just to be as clear as possible. And the nice thing about the gray granite is that is also a translucent clay that has the flecks in it, which is why it looks gray, but it's actually translucent with dots. So I'm going to put a little bit of a little bit of gray granite in this, and then I'm going to put it in the very thinnest I possibly can. So you just keep putting it through the pasta machine, then making it one notch thinner, and again and again and again until you have as paper thin as you possibly can. Let's try that. Okay, so this is what we get. Just a super thin layer, thinner than, like as thin as paper. And that's what we're going to need for this next bit. So now what I want to do is I want to use the powders to add some wonderful shimmery color to our squid. And then we're going to cover it with that thin layer that we just made so it will sandwich it underneath the translucent. So we'll see the shine, but it won't be on the surface. So the eyeball is going to be right around in here. All right, and then the tentacles are going to come flapping out over here. And we can just make this as much or as little as we want. But I kind of want to do some sort of, what would you call this? Just some dappling, so that it's not 100% coverage. So there's some of the blue. Get a little bit underneath. All right, and then I'll put gold in the other area. Okay, and so now I can add gold to the rest of this area. Okay. So just like that. Now what you're going to want to do is, let me get this out of the way, blow. Get rid of that little excess on the surface, and then let's come around with our sheet here, and I'm just going to lay that over the top. And I'm going to press that down, and go ahead. We can go ahead and pick that up. This is a lot of the sheet. We don't need that much, but I want to make sure I can cover it completely. So let me get some of this away. Then I can pick this up, and I can make sure it's wrapped all the way around our little guy. Again, getting rid of the excess. Okay, and then press it in place really well. Now when this bakes, it will be clear, translucent, so you'll see that shimmery color underneath. And we'll put a little bit more on the surface too by the time we're all done, but this should give us some glow from underneath, which I think is kind of a fun look. Now you notice what I'm doing is I'm sort of rolling it on the edge there. What that's doing is it's getting rid of the wrinkles that happen when you kind of bring that clay around, and make the edges as soft as possible without me having to do a lot of blending. I'm letting the tile do the blending, but I keep coming back and adjusting it, because otherwise what happens is it starts getting misshapen, and there's a little bit there where I didn't quite get it on there all the way. Okay, so there's some excess here. Let's just trim that away. And I think most of the rest of it looks pretty good. It's a little extra, but not too badly. All right, so we're back to our shape, which is that nice, delightful oval. Let's put that back in the center there and see if there's any problems. I think we're good. I think we've got our little squiddly body back again. So now we're going to do some tentacles over here and some more shimmer and the eyeball, and then we'll crystal this one up so far. So good, right? So we've got the rest of our mixed clay there. The tentacles, the eyeball's going to be kind of like right in here, and the tentacles are going to come out in this direction. So what I think I want to do is pick this up, and let's make a hole in this area where those tentacles are going to come out of. So I've got my tool, and I'm kind of rolling it around and around to make a nice big area that the tentacles can flop out of. So you see we still have our rounded bit here, then it kind of comes a bit flat, which is sort of how they look. And then I've got some space in there for tentacles. Okay, so tentacles are pretty simple. And they do have 8 little tentacles. Well, I guess you could call them, I'm not sure. There's some difference between whether something's a tentacle or a suckered appendage or whatever. For the purposes of our discussion today, we're going to refer to all of them as tentacles. And in theory, yes, 8 of them. So I'm going to just make 8 little guys like this. And they're pointed-ish at both ends because they're going to have to squeeze in there. And they do not all have to be the same length because, you know, they can stretch them out and retract them and all that kind of cephalopody stuff. Okay, 8 little appendages. And I'm going to just shove them all in that hole. And one thing you can do is kind of when you put them in is shove them just a little bit. So that gives room for the next batch. This is a lot of tentacles. Okay. I think we just about got it. Now instead of them erupting all over the place like that, like a craziness, they do tend to kind of bring them all sort of down here. So let's bring them all down and controlled. And maybe a couple of them are reaching out to taste the waters and see what's going on out there. And a couple maybe curled under like this. So, you know, looks like he's in control of himself or herself. All right, so there we have a nice little tentacle cluster. And we're going to add some more powders to this eventually. In fact, let's go ahead and do it now because we're going to put that eyeball on. And I want to kind of make sure that the powders don't get all over the eyeball. So let's bring this back. Good. But let's start with maybe golden at the tips. That seems like a good idea, don't you think? The bobtail squid, one of the reasons I picked them is not only because they are something found here in Maui, which of course is near and dear to my heart, but they also are just such a cute little thing and so very colorful. And it would be the perfect animal to do a bunch of blingage to, so that's what we're going to do. So now I'm going to do the blue up here and bring that down from the edge. And I'm going to end up having some of the blue up onto the body too, but not just yet, because we got to put that eyeball on there first. And the thing about putting mica down is mica is a rock. So once you put it in place, other things don't really stick very well anymore. So you want to make sure you get all your sticky stuff, all your clays and things on first before you press in, before you put the mica on, so everything will stay put. Blow away some of that extra. And I think we're looking pretty good so far. So now we're going to want to put the protuberance where the eyeball goes. And it's pretty big. I'm going to make a big blob like this. Now the eye is going to be smaller than that, but that's how that blob goes. And I think that would look kind of good right like that. That's about where it should go. And now I've got a second ball about the same size, hopefully, and I'm going to put it on the back side because that's where another eye would be. While I'm there, I can clean my tile. To give it sort of a sense of proportion. So see how it's got like that other eye is back there? We won't do anything to that eye back there, but we just kind of give it a blob so that it looks like it's there and in place. Now, I would suggest that we blend this in a little bit. I don't want it to quite look like a Muppet, although there's nothing wrong with that, but I think blending that in will make it have a much nicer feel than if it's just stuck on the surface. So what I'm doing is I'm using my tool to pull the clays from this top part down onto the body, and I'll do it on the other side as well. And then I will continue to use my tools to blend that all in and make it all look sort of seamless. Now remember that this surface here was just the translucent. It didn't have any of this white body in it, so it's not going to look exactly the same. It's not going to blend in perfectly. Okay, so you want to make sure that as you're doing your blending, you're kind of pulling it and helping feather that in place, because you're blending kind of a different color. So if it doesn't look like, hey, that's not looking exactly blend in, that's why. And we'll do that on this side, and I'm not blending it in on the front part there, although I may regret that, so let me do a little bit. So actually I am going to blend a little bit more here on the front, but the rest of it that's resting on the tentacle I think we're okay with. All right, so there's that. And then I'm going to do the same on this back side. All right, that's looking pretty good there too. Little micro adjustment here. And now we're going to want to do the same thing around the eye that we did on the underbody. And that is to take our powders, put it all over the surface, and then put some more of that little thin translucent on top of it. So I'm going to get quite a lot of blue going on around here, on this and on this. And you can add gold if you prefer, but I think I'm okay with the blue. And let's just blow that away. Let's bring in our little layer here. And let's cut this down into size. Try to make that a little rounded. And you can tell I'm not cutting it out perfectly. I kind of like the irregular edges. I think that blends a little bit nicer. And remember, it's not going to stick because I have so much of that powder on there. It's going to be sticking to the body over here. So that's where the sticking is going to be, is over here, instead of on all that powder. So you might have to struggle with it a little bit to get it to stay put, but I know you can do it. So see how that's going? There is going to be a little bit of wrinklage, but you can just press and play with that until it all blends itself in. If you get an air bubble or a little pocket, you know, you can just press it with a little needle tool or with your blade and let the air out and then press it down. You should be just fine. And if you haven't gone too crazy on the powders outside the eyeball itself, then this should blend down in there just no problemo. And I always use my tools to do that blending, but then I come back with my fingers and just let the heat and pressure of me pushing it with my fingers do the rest of the smoothing, so that I don't have the tool lines in my face, because I don't want that. Now you might say, well, why don't you put some of that on top of the tentacles? Because that's a lot of work and I don't really think it's necessary there. They look a little different than the body itself does, so I think we're okay with what we have. But I will do this eyeball over here. Eye bulge, and we'll blend that in the same way. And keep that little line here, you know, so you can tell that that's kind of the eye bulging out on that other side. As you press that together, make sure that's very visible and noticeable, I guess. That's the word I want. And let's blend that in. Okay, so there we've got our little squid eyeballs poking out. Everything else seems to be blended in well and smooth. Got some nice tentacle coloring there. Everything looks like it's looking good so far. If you have any brown powder, this is an optional step, is I always like adding just a little bit to create some like depth and naturalness. It's not necessary that you do that, but I like it. I think it's a good little additional step. But again, optional. But if you got some and you want to use it, this is where I would put it. Right at the base of those tentacles, right kind of around that eye bulge and mouth right there. So see how that kind of gives the whole thing just a little bit more kind of naturalness. I don't know what it is about the brown powder, but it just makes things look more believable, I guess is the word. But again, that's optional. If you've got it, you can use it. If you don't, it's all right. Okay, so far, so good. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is put the little eyeball in place. And what I want to do first is just take my tool and poke a little hole in so that we've got an indentation in there. And that's when I'm going to come back with that little bit of white clay that I had extra and put a little ball of white clay in there first before I put the eyeball in. So let's see. This size should be plenty. And I'm going to turn it into a teardrop, because teardrop is the way to kind of get it in there and still make it look round. Then you don't kind of lose it behind everything. And then I'm going to poke another little hole so I've got room for my eyeball just to set right down in there. Bam. Now, squids have color behind their eye and everything, but I'm just going to go with this. I think that's plenty. If you want to get crazy with it and add some color, you sure can. If you want to put powder or anything around there, you can, but I'm going to kind of bling it up with crystals, so I feel like I'm pretty good the way it is. When you look up a bobtail squid to kind of see your colors and stuff, they change. I mean, they're purples, they're pinks, they're blues, they're golds, they're all kinds of fun colors. And I'm really wanting to capture sort of the little dots and everything that they do with crystals instead of the actual little black pigment dots or whatever those things are that octopuses and squids and everything do. And I feel like that kind of is in keeping with the squid, like I mentioned. So all I'm going to do is now start taking my little bling and pressing them in place all over my little guy, because look at how much fun that's going to be, right? So this is up to you how much you want to do, but the way to do this on polymer so that it sticks in is to press it down. So say I've picked it up with my little waxy tip and I've pressed it with my finger so that it's pushing itself into the clay, especially when you get around the corner, because what happens if it's not stuck into the clay enough where the clay grabs around it? As it gets hot, that glue gets sort of slidey and it slides off the edge. So you want to keep everything in the flat zone, not so much around the backside. And if you do on the backside, you really want to push it into a little indentation so that you don't lose it once it starts getting in the oven and hot. So I'm going to just kind of do this, and you see how I'm kind of pushing that down until it blurps in there. That's what we want. And just put in as much or as little of this as you feel like. The back end of this particular tool, the Crystal Katana, has like a little flat thing that you can really shove on those crystals. So that's a very handy way to make sure it stays put. But your finger is still the best tool for that. Now I'm going to put them all kind of clustered around in here, some around the eye, and maybe we'll see if there's any on the tentacles. I might not put anything on the tentacles and just keep it in this area. But that's my plan. We'll see how it goes. Got some nice shine going on this guy. All right, so we could put some some crystals coming down the tentacles. Not sure how I feel about that, so I'm just going to kind of look at it for a minute and figure it out. And I can add, since we've got the color deep down in the body there, I can add more, but I think I'm going to like the way that kind of nuancy little coloring in there goes. So we'll kind of see how that looks when it's all done and baked, but I think that might look pretty nice. So I don't know, let me just place a crystal here on the tentacle and see what it would look like. I'm not pressing it in yet. I'm just going to kind of press it and see. Yeah, I think that works. Shall we do it? All right, let's. This is a little trickier because there's not as much place to shove on here. So just take your time and press gently with your tool. You can use the end of this tool if you want, if this one's too hard for you, but just a couple little ones there. That looks good. Good. Let's see. How about another one here? Just a few. You don't have to do much. I think a little bit will go a long way on these. And if there's too much powder, you can use your tool to kind of scrape away at the powders to make a space for the crystals to stick if you want to. And see, I don't think we need to do many here. Just like 3 there, 2 there, maybe just 1 up here on this guy. What do you reckon? I think that'll work. I think that's looking pretty darn bling, don't you? I like that. Okay, so let's add just a teeny bit more powder. I'm going to take some of this gold, and that white bit that's there around the eye, I'm going to make it gold. And you can just brush it off the glass of the eye so it'll stick. And it won't stick onto the crystals or anything. I mean, it will look like it's sticking on at first, but it's not usually permanently so. You can kind of brush that off when it's all done. And then I'm going to take just a little bit more of the blue and give it just a little bit more here and there. Okay, just like that. And I think that will be enough. All right, there we go. Now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put just a little bit of a fin thing here. They've got a super thin, clear little finny bit there. We'll do that next, and then it will be done and ready. Okay, so I have a little ball of the translucent mix, the stuff that we did, the very paper thin stuff, not the body stuff. I'm going to try that because I want it to be very see-through looking, because this is how it is in the squid. And I don't want it to be that long. So how about this size? Okay, about like that. And I'm going to roll that out into what looks like the tentacle. So something like this. Flatten that out a little bit. Okay. And then I'm going to use my tool to just put some indentations in it. And then I'm going to put a little bit of the powder on my finger. Going to get some of the gold and some of the blue. Make sure that it's not very thick of a layer and just swipe it on the surface. And you see how it just picks up those ridges, which is what we want. Now I'm going to get my cutting blade. Cut this so I only have a little bit of that left, and then it's just going to lay right on the surface there. So I'm going to lift it off, shoop, pick it up, and just put it on like this. In fact, let's bring it on a little bit more here and around to there. So it kind of makes like an S curve up and around like that. Okay. And if you want, now you can go back and just kind of blend a little bit in each one of those notches. Well, not each, but a few strategic notches to make sure it's grabbing onto the body. But that's probably all you need for its little ridginess there. Press that tight. In fact, I'm going to put just a little bit of gold along that outer edge. There we go. Little guy complete, ready for baking. So let's talk for a minute about baking. Most of you watching this are familiar with polymer clay. You know how to bake. Some of you do not. So those of you who do know, you may mentally check out right now, think of other things for about a minute. And for the rest of you, polymer clay is a heat curing material, which means that it needs the heat of an oven in order to become that plastic that we know and love so well. So what you're going to do is follow the instructions on your clay. I'm using Primo, but all of the packages of clay will tell you how long and for what temperature you should cure your clay in your oven. And doesn't matter, electric, gas, it's all good. No microwave, but traditional heat ovens are fantastic. So you're going to want to preheat your oven to the right temperature. For Primo clay, like I'm using, it's 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Just heat it, have a thermometer inside the oven so that you can accurately monitor the internal temperature, not what the knob says, because ovens are dirty, rotten liars, and they often say something on their knobbage, but inside it's a completely different thing. So have an oven thermometer, that way you can accurately tell what's going on. Preheating usually takes about 15 minutes or so, maybe 20. Might be some micro adjustments to get the internal temperature to 275. Then take your little squid on the tile. We were working on a tile. Just pop that sucker right in there on the tile and bake for the amount of time listed on your package, which will involve math, because it's usually based on per quarter inch of thickness at the thickest spot, blah, blah, blah. So for this little squid, probably about 45 minutes to an hour, I recommend, because that's usually what I do, and therefore it must be right. At the end of that time, you may just turn the oven off and let it cool down, or you may gently take it out, pot holders of course, don't use your teeth or your bare fingers because it's hot in there, and just let it cool. And as polymer clay cools, it hardens. So it is curing in the heat, but it sort of hardens as it cools down. So it's going to feel almost like a little bit of an eraser. So if you're waiting for some magic thing for it to look different or feel different to let you know that it's done, nope. You have to go by time and temperature and then let it cool down. There should still be a bit of gentle flexibility when it has been cured completely, which does not mean you can start yanking on every part and see if it's good, because that's how you break things, and especially if they're not your own, leave them alone. But if you have baked it long enough and hot enough, there should be some bit of flexibility in that clay, like on the little tentacles or on that little fin bit. All right, so that's all there is to it. Easy peasy, right? If you wish, you may then use a clear glaze, and I would recommend a matte or a satin instead of a gloss, to put on the surface of the clay if you want to give it a finish that will make it look a little bit more shiny, which you may like. It's not necessary though. If you're going to wear it, what that does is it will protect that mica powder that you added and the other pigment powder on there from being rubbed off with wear and tear that you normally would get if you're wearing it as a jewelry piece. So that's nice. Just don't go over the eyeball or the crystals, because that doesn't make them any shinier. It actually kind of works the other way around. So just use a paintbrush and gently paint on the surface if you wish and let that dry. Just make sure you pick a glaze that is compatible with polymer. So I would suggest that you get the glaze that the company whose clay you're using creates, because they know what works with their clay. I'm again using Sculpey products, which Primo is, so I'm using a Sculpey satin glaze, which I highly recommend. It's great stuff. And all of the polymer glazes will work on other polymer brands, so no worries there. Just watch out for just general craft glazes, because there is sometimes a chemical incompatibility, which means they will go on the clay but they'll never quite dry, and it's a sticky nightmare. So don't be experimenting. Find out what other people do and have been successful with, and then you can do the same. All right, so that is it. That is in a nutshell everything you ever wanted to know but were afraid to ask about baking a bling squid or other polymer creature. Good luck. Ta-da! And there you go, a bling squid. Isn't that exactly what you wanted to do today? I know that's what I wanted. So have fun, enjoy your creativity. May you make as many bling squids as you need to feel fulfilled as an artist. Bye.